Well, hey guys, I am Lynn Hanson from North Park Church. Really glad to be sharing with you this week in our life groups. I'm wound up, man. As you can see behind me, we're in a new series here, and it's called Life in the Jungle. And the theme is all about, the truth about living like hell. Well, the jungle, the reason for our series is that the jungle is the most dangerous place on earth. Survival is nearly impossible. And so it's the name of the game in the jungle. And the food chain really dictates life in the jungle. And the question is, how does that compare to your life? Some of us are living like we're in the jungle. And we're living like hell, right? It's just a survival mentality, trying to hang on to life and worth and all of those things at any price. And so many people are really living with that literal jungle mentality. Kill or be killed. And that's what God speaks about, I think, in Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 16. Listen carefully to what he says here. He says, "There are 6 things the Lord hates. 7 things he detests." God hates the things that keep you in the jungle. And he's going to name off 7 things there. We're not going to talk about those in our life group this week, but we will be talking about them through the series. The things that trap you into thinking that you have no way out, that you have no choices, and that this is the only thing that you can do is to live with this survival mentality. God hates that stuff that keeps you like that you allow to get a hold of you that way. And so the truth about living like hell is that God hates the things that hurt you, and he's got a much better plan than that for you. God hates what hurts you. Get a hold of that. Get that in your head. Well, the story that we're going to be looking at in our life groups this week teaches that God gives us opportunities. All of us, every one of us, has opportunities given to us. And living like hell is our choice. If we want to do that, we can do that. But it's all about what we do with what we've been given as to whether or not we just live like hell or we really have a purpose and a plan and we do something with our lives and we kind of get out of that jungle mentality. Again, guys, there's 3 components to storytelling that we do in our life groups. And I want you to get a hold of this because I'm going to go ahead and read it to you from the Bible, but somebody's going to retell the story after I read it, and you're going to do that basically from memory. Here it is, and this is from Matthew chapter 25. The very first verse at Matthew 25 says, "At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like." So Jesus is telling these stories to illustrate great, powerful truths, and so he says, the kingdom of heaven will be like. But then we skip down to verse 14, and the reason is that I wanted to show you he was talking about the kingdom of heaven there. Verse 14 says, "And again it will be like," meaning the kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work, and he gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off and he dug a hole in the ground and he hid his master's money. Well, a long time later, the master of those servants returned to settle accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." The man with the 2 talents also came. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more." His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful With a few things I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. "Master," he said, "I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you." His master replied, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the banker, so that when I returned I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him, give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth," whatever that is. Now, somebody retell that story. Put your notes down, put your Bible aside, whatever you got, Cliff's notes, whatever you have. Put them aside and tell the story, and the rest of the group follow along, and then rebuild that story. Tell them what they missed after they finished. Go ahead and do that, would you please? All right, you've got me clicked back on. Hopefully you have retold the story, and somebody, and then the group has kind of put it back together again and rebuilt it, and helped by adding the things in that were missed. Now, discussion questions. Question number 1. This is a parable, by the way. This story is a parable. A parable is a story that is really God designed to teach us a powerful truth. And so we want to get a hold of this. God has great purpose for us, and including it in His Word. Jesus often taught in parables to give us powerful truths from everyday things that took place. Now, what do you see as the primary meaning in this story? What's it all about? What's this story about? Go ahead and talk about that, would you please? All right, question number 2. Let's look at the 3 main characters in the story for a minute. I know what you're thinking, and I'm not talking about those 3 characters. I'm talking about sets of characters. Look carefully at verse 1 and at verse 14. First of all, who does the man in the story, or he's called the master later on, who does he represent in the story? Now remember, it's a story from everyday life that's meant to illustrate a powerful truth. So who does the man or the master represent? Second question that goes with that, who do the servants represent? Who are they supposed to be in the story? And then the talent. A talent is a unit of money, perhaps a little bit more than $1,000. That's not the point, though. The story isn't really about money. So what do the talents represent? So who is the master in the story? Who does he represent? Who do the servants represent? And what do the talents represent? Go ahead and talk about that, would you please? All right, guys. In case you missed it, and so that we can use it as a stepping stone to go on and talk about some other things that are super important here, the man or who's called the master later on represents God in the story, and the servants are people, you and I, in the story. And the talents of money, think about this now, it's everything that you are given in this world. Every single resource, from brains to brawn, to material things, to personality, to houses, to money, everything, every resource you are given is represented by those talents. Now, question 3. Look carefully at verse 15 there in the story, and notice that the people are given various amounts of resource there in the story. What was expected of the man who was given the least amount? What was expected of the man who was given the least amount? And then, along with that, I want you to think about this and talk about this. What do you think his life was like? Here we are at the end of his life, and he's facing God, and he's given an account for what it is that he's done with the resources that have been given to him. But let's go back. What do you think his life was like? Can you get any indication of that through this story? Go ahead and talk about that, would you please? All right. Here's what I have to say about that. You knew I'd have something, right? I personally believe that the man who received the least amount had a horrible life. I think he lived like hell. And I don't think it's because he didn't have much. I don't believe that at all, because I don't have much and I live very well. But here's the reason that I think that he was living like hell. I believe that he lived that way because of two factors. I believe that his life was terrible because two factors always exist in this story. Now look at this carefully. First, notice that he was selfish. Selfish people live terrible lives. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. You look at this guy, and you see that he buried the resources that he was given. Well, what does that mean? It means that he buried every good thing that came his way by trying to keep it and use it for himself and his own personal gain. There wasn't any sharing, there wasn't any development, there wasn't any growth, there wasn't any going out there and using it for the development of the kingdom of God. Nothing positive. He was selfish. That's living like hell, man. And I'll tell you, the second thing I see there is that he had a very screwed up view of God. Did you get that? You look at verses 24 and 25. In fact, put your eye on those verses right now. He was fearful because the God that he knew, supposedly, was very demanding. And he had decided that God was demanding simply because God expected this man to use well what was given to him. Now the Bible says we don't have anything that hasn't been given to us. And so the fact that God would ask us to use it well, is that a really terrible thing? Is that an unfair thing? I know a lot of people walk around with a chip on their shoulder all the time, thinking that somebody's using them or somebody's taking advantage of them. You don't have anything that God didn't give you. This guy was really living a terrible life, I believe. So now, question number 4 is one of our staple questions. Who do you identify most with in the story? And there's a lot of choices there. There's a 1, 2, 3 servant. There's the one who entrusts property. There are a lot of different avenues to go with who you identify most with in the story. Now look at it carefully and decide who you think you identify with most. Alright, great. Question number 5, what impacted you most in the story, or the discussion about the story? In other words, what was the gotcha moment here in this story? What was it that got a hold of your heart? Question is this, really the important part of it is, what will you do with it? What are you going to do with the gotcha moment? God has gotten a hold of your heart through something that we've talked about or some part of His Word here. What are you going to do with that? Alright? Well guys, I hope that you have the rest of a great life group, and I will see you soon.